Her name is Zuri, just 11 years old, no father, no home, just her pregnant mother, her unborn sibling, and the unforgiving streets. Every day was a fight for survival, searching for food, dodging danger, and clinging to hope. But one tragic afternoon, everything changed. A reckless hit-and-run driver struck her mother, leaving her bleeding and barely conscious. They rushed her to the nearest hospital, only to face another cruel blow. No deposit, no treatment. Zuri had nothing, no money, no family to turn to. Desperate and on the brink of losing the only person she had left, she was told to take her mother away. But fate had other plans. At that very moment, Zuri crossed paths with the billionaire CEO of the most powerful hospital in town. In tears, she fell to her knees, clutching his leg. "Please, sir, I have no money. Don't let my mother die." What happened next will not only shock you, it will change your perspective on life forever. You'll understand that indeed we're living in a very small world. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Because this is a story you will remember long after it ends. And if you're just tuning in, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story. If this one touches your heart, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs hope today. Zuri was not born poor. She came into the world surrounded by the warm laughter of neighbors, the gentle prayers of her mother, and the secure arms of her father. Their home was a modest rented bungalow in Surulere, Lagos, the kind of place where the paint was peeling in the corners, but the air was always filled with the aroma of fried plantain, where the little compound bloomed with hibiscus flowers, and the evening breeze carried the scent of roasting corn from the roadside. Her father, Chuka, was not a rich man, but he was a good man, the kind of man everyone in the neighborhood respected. He worked at a logistics company, leaving home every morning in a neatly ironed shirt, smelling faintly of shaving cream and talcum powder. He always kissed Zuri on the forehead before stepping out and said the same words. "Your name means beautiful, Zuri, and that's exactly what your life will be." Those words made her chest swell with a quiet pride she didn't yet understand. Her mother, Ada, was a full-time housewife, gentle in spirit, but strong in love. She kept the house warm, clean, and alive with food and laughter. On some evenings, when the generator buzzed and the neighborhood fell into its own quiet hum, Chuka would put on old high-life music and dance with Ada in the living room while Zuri giggled from the couch. They didn't have much, but to Zuri, they had everything. Life, as she knew it, was simple and safe. But all that changed on one heavy evening that seemed to swallow the sun. It started like any other day. Chuka left for work with his usual smile, promising to bring home suya for dinner. Ada hummed softly as she prepared a pot of jollof rice, and Zuri played with her school notebook, sketching pictures instead of solving the math problems her teacher had given. By late afternoon, Ada set the table, 3 plates just as always, and Zuri's stomach rumbled in happy anticipation. But as the sky darkened, Chuka didn't come home. At first, Ada told herself he must be caught in Lagos traffic. She switched on the old TV and flipped through channels, trying to ignore the small ache building in her chest. But then the phone call started. Strange, incomplete calls from neighbors and a man she barely knew from her husband's workplace. Their voices were low and hesitant, as if afraid to say something out loud. One call said there had been an accident on the highway. Another mentioned a collision involving a company vehicle. Still, no one gave details. Ada's hands shook as she clutched her phone. "Zuri, go inside and do your homework," she said, her voice trembling. But Zuri didn't move. She had never seen her mother's face look so pale. Minutes later, there was a loud knock at the door. When Ada opened it, she found a young man standing there, his shirt damp with sweat. He was a motorcycle rider from their area, and his eyes held the kind of pity that hurt more than cruelty. "Auntie, I'm sorry, I heard your husband." Ada grabbed his arm. "My husband what? Where is he? Where is Chuka?" The young man swallowed hard. "They say, he didn't make it. The motor, it hit hard. He was on his way to work. The road." Ada's knees gave way and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her mouth. Zuri ran to her, her small arms wrapping around her mother's shaking frame. And just like that, a wall had fallen across their lives. There was no body to bury, no final goodbye. They were told the accident was so severe that Chuka's remains were unrecognizable. What the police returned to Ada was a burnt, broken wallet, his work ID card, and a single shirt button they claimed was found near the scene. The funeral rites were brief and hollow, the condolences from neighbors laced with whispers of God gives and God takes. Zuri sat quietly through it all, clutching her father's old wristwatch, which no longer ticked. In the days that followed, the house grew quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that pressed down on your chest and made breathing a conscious effort. Every night, Zuri found herself waiting for the sound of her father's key turning in the gate, for his familiar footsteps in the hallway, for his voice calling, "Zuri, my beautiful girl." But the only thing that came was silence. And silence, she was learning, could be louder than anything in the world. And though she didn't know it yet, that silence was just the beginning. Bills do not care for grief. They do not pause because you are mourning. They arrive on schedule, in brown envelopes, in phone calls that never end with sympathy, in landlord knocks that sound like threats. It had been barely a month since Chuka's sudden death when Ada's strength began to crack. The house that once carried the scent of jollof rice now smelled faintly of dust. The laughter was gone, replaced by the constant rustle of paper bills and the groan of a generator that ran less and less because fuel was now a luxury. Ada's belly had grown. The baby inside kicked, as if unaware of the troubles that waited outside the womb. Zuri was only 11, but she noticed everything. The way her mother sat longer before standing, the way her voice sometimes trailed off mid-sentence, as though she had forgotten where she was going. School had already stopped for Zuri. The first term after her father's death was left unpaid, and even the headmistress, who once doted on her, began to avoid Ada's calls. "It's not my fault, Zuri," Ada whispered one evening when Zuri stared too long at her old, folded uniform. "You will return to school. I promise, boss." But promises could not keep the lights on. The first person to make their situation truly real was the landlord. He was not a bad man, at least not in public opinion. A plump, middle-aged businessman who wore starched white caftans and gold-rimmed glasses. He always had a polite nod for Chuka when he paid the rent on time. But now, without Chuka's monthly transfers, his eyes had changed. The first month after the funeral, he had knocked gently. "Madam Ada, sorry for your loss, but you know the rent is due." Ada had clasped her hands and begged for more time, explaining that she was still trying to sort things out. He gave her 2 weeks. By the end of those 2 weeks, nothing had changed. The logistics company had paid Chuka's death benefits, but almost all of it went to settling debts. The hospital bills from the funeral arrangements, the church contributions, even the transport for distant relatives who came to mourn. What remained could barely buy food for a month. The landlord's second visit was colder. "This is business," he said, though he didn't quite meet Ada's eyes. "If you can't pay, I have no choice." By the third visit, he didn't bother with sympathy at all. He came with 2 young men whose arms bulged under their t-shirts and whose expressions left no room for negotiation. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They simply began to remove things. The television, gone. The standing fan that had been a gift from Chuka's office, gone. The plastic dining table, the mattress from Zuri's room, the small gas cooker, all loaded into the landlord's pickup truck. Zuri stood in the corner clutching her school bag, even though there was nothing inside but a notebook and her father's old wristwatch. She felt as though pieces of her life were being carried out one by one, until soon nothing would be left. "Please," Ada's voice broke as she followed them to the door. "I just need a little more time. I'm pregnant. I have a child. Where will we go?" The landlord shrugged, already turning away. "If you pay the rent, you get your things back. Otherwise, I'll consider them payment for the debt." When they were gone, Ada closed the door and leaned against it, her hands trembling. Zuri watched her slide down to the floor and bury her face in her palms. For a long time, neither of them spoke. That night, they slept on mats borrowed from a neighbor who whispered, "Sorry, but you know how Lagos is." It was the first time Zuri truly understood what her father had meant when he told her, "Life can change without warning." She just hadn't known it could change so much, so fast. When the landlord finally told them they had until the end of the week to vacate, Ada decided there was only one thing left to try. Family. Family, she thought, could not turn them away. She still believed that, despite how quiet Chuka's relatives had been since the funeral, blood had a way of remembering itself in hard times. And so, one hot Monday morning, Ada wrapped her belly with a faded wrapper, dressed Zuri in her cleanest dress, and they began their journey to Oshodi, where Chuka's elder brother lived. It took 3 Danfo rides and a long walk under the punishing sun to reach his compound. Zuri's slippers were dusty, and sweat clung to her back by the time they knocked on the gate. The gateman, chewing slowly on a stick of sugar cane, looked them up and down. "Who you dey find?" "My husband's elder brother," Ada said, trying to smile through exhaustion. "Please tell him Ada is here." The gateman frowned. "Oga no day." From the balcony above, a woman with skin like polished bronze and eyes that did not blink stood watching them. Zuri saw her lean over and whisper to someone inside before disappearing. Minutes later, the gate swung open, not in welcome, but with the kind of force that made Ada take a step back. Chuka's brother stood there, his expression unreadable. But before Ada could speak, a shrill voice came from behind him, his wife. "What are you doing here? Haven't you done enough?" Ada's face tightened. "Done enough? I don't understand." "You killed my brother," the woman spat. "Don't stand here pretending to be innocent. Everyone knows some women. They use charms to tie men down." Zuri's head snapped up. "My mummy is not a witch," she shouted, her small voice shaking with fury. The woman's eyes narrowed at Zuri. "Little girl, keep quiet." Ada's brother-in-law stepped forward, his voice low. "We didn't support this marriage from the start, Ada. Now, my brother is gone and you think you can come here to eat from us? Leave before you bring your bad luck into my home." Ada's lips trembled, but she said nothing. She turned, holding Zuri's hand tightly, and walked away. They hadn't even been offered water. The next stop was far away, Ada's own childhood town in Anambra State. She thought, if my husband's people have rejected me, surely my own parents will not. They borrowed transport money from Mama Peace, a street vendor who sold a car near the bridge. The journey was long, the road riddled with potholes, and Zuri drifted in and out of sleep as the Danfo bumped along. When they arrived, the white iron gates of Ada's parents' compound stood tall, guarded by orange trees heavy with fruit. Ada knocked, her heart racing. The door opened, and there stood her mother, or the woman she had called mother all her life. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Mama, it's me, Ada." Her mother's eyes flickered with something that was not joy. She stepped aside, not to let them in, but to block the doorway. "Go back." "Mama?" Ada's voice cracked. Her father appeared behind her mother, his glasses slipping down his nose. "We told you not to come back here." "But I have nowhere else. My husband is gone. I am pregnant. This is Zuri, your granddaughter." He shook his head slowly, each word like a knife. "You are not our child." The words froze Ada where she stood. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Her father glanced at her mother, then back at her. "We adopted you from a man who sold you to us over 40 years ago. He said he found you abandoned in the market. We raised you, clothed you, fed you, but you were never truly ours. And now you return here to bring shame?" Ada felt her knees weaken. "All my life, all this time." Her mother's voice was sharp. "We have our own children now. Leave this place. You were never meant to return." The gates shut with a metallic clang that echoed down the empty street. Ada stood there for a long moment, as if the air had turned to stone around her. Zuri tugged at her wrapper. "Mummy, where will we go?" Ada knelt, tears spilling freely. She took Zuri's face in her hands. "Then we have only each other." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A vow to survive, even if the world had decided they did not belong anywhere. Lagos is a city that hides its broken stories in plain sight. Beneath the roar of Danfos, the honking of impatient Okadas, and the flashing billboards that promise a better life, there are shadows. Places where people exist but do not belong. That was where Ada and Zuri found themselves. After the rejection from both families, they drifted for days, moving from one street corner to another. They tried sleeping in front of a closed shop one night, but at dawn, the shop owner kicked at Ada's leg with his boot. "Move before I call the police." Another night, they curled up behind a mechanic workshop, thinking the smell of engine oil would keep people away. But when the mechanics arrived in the morning, they shouted, threw dirty rags at them, and chased them out like stray cheese. Finally, they found the space under the Echo Bridge, a stretch of concrete where the rumble of cars above was constant, and the wind smelled of exhaust and salt from the distant lagoon. There were others there, People with tired faces, plastic bags for pillows, and eyes that darted too quickly. At first, Ada was afraid to lie down. She kept looking over her shoulder, one hand on her belly, the other gripping Zuri's arm. That night, Zuri didn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the groan of trucks overhead and the quiet shuffle of feet in the darkness. Somewhere nearby, someone coughed, a deep, wet cough that sounded like it had been there for years. Days turned into weeks. Zuri quickly learned the rules of the streets. Never fall asleep too deeply. Keep your slippers close or they'll be gone by morning. Hide whatever little money you have where nobody will think to look. Don't ask too many questions about anyone's past. There were nights when area boys, young men with hard eyes and empty bottles in their hands, came to harass them. Madam, this is our territory. If you want to stay here, you must pay. Ada would plead, her voice shaking. We have nothing. Please, we are just trying to survive. Sometimes they walked away, sometimes they didn't. One night, a drunk one leaned too close to Ada's face, his breath hot and sour. Zuri stepped in front of her mother, her small hands balled into fists. Leave my mummy alone, the man laughed, a cold, mocking sound. This one get mouth oh. But he stepped back. Maybe it was the defiance in her eyes. Despite the fear, there were flickers of kindness. A woman called Mama Peace, who sold akara near the bridge during the day, noticed them. She would sometimes wrap 2 balls of akara in brown paper and slip them into Zuri's hand. Don't let shame kill you, my pikin, she said one morning. Better to beg and live than pretend and die. She even let Zuri fetch water from her drum sometimes, though she warned her not to waste a drop. On good days, Zuri and Ada would find scraps of bread from roadside stalls that had closed for the night. On bad days, they drank only water and tried to ignore the hunger twisting in their stomachs. The rain was the worst. When it poured, the water would drip through cracks in the bridge, forming cold puddles that crept into their sleeping space. Their thin nylon sheet did little to keep them dry. Zuri would curl against Ada, feeling her mother's trembling from the cold. Ada's hands would rub Zuri's back slowly, even though her own teeth were chattering. Sometimes Zuri would wake in the middle of the night and see her mother staring into the darkness. Mummy, are you okay? Ada would force a smile. I'm just thinking of how to get us out of here. Zuri didn't press her. She knew her mother was holding on by threads, and she didn't want to add more weight to the burden. Still, every morning as the first light slipped under the bridge and painted the concrete in dull gold, Ada would whisper the same words to Zuri. We will leave this place. We will find a room. You will go back to school. You will wear your uniform again. And Zuri would nod, clinging to those words as if they were the only thing keeping her from falling into the hole the world had dug beneath them. Neither of them knew how or when, but they both believed it. Because believing was all they had left. The decision came one afternoon when the hunger was so sharp it felt like a blade in their stomachs. Ada sat under the bridge with her back against a concrete pillar, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other shading her eyes from the glare of the sun. Mummy, Zuri said softly, we can't just wait here every day. Maybe we should work. Ada looked at her, 11 years old, skinny from skipped meals, but with eyes that still held a stubborn kind of light. Work? Doing what? I can sell pure water, Zuri said quickly, as if she had been thinking about it for days. Other children do it. I see them running in traffic. I can do it too. Ada hesitated. She had sworn that Zuri would never have to live that kind of life, barefoot in the streets, dodging cars for a few naira. But hunger made pride look foolish. By evening, Ada had borrowed N500 from Mama Peace, promising to pay her back in small bits. The next morning, they went to the market together. Zuri's excitement made her steps quick. They bought a blue plastic bowl and filled it with sachets of pure water cooled in blocks of ice. Their days began before sunrise. Zuri would balance the bowl carefully on her head, the cold water dripping down her neck, while Ada, with her swollen belly, carried a small tray of fresh peppers wrapped in newspaper. They made their way toward the bus stops and market roads, weaving through the noise of Lagos. Danfo conductors shouting destinations, hawkers calling out prices, engines rumbling like impatient drums. Pure water, pure water! Zuri's voice carried over the traffic, loud enough to draw customers, but cheerful enough to make people smile. Some drivers bought 3 or 4 sachets and told her to keep the change. Others ignored her completely. rolling up their windows without looking. On some days, they had moments of laughter, like the time a man in a suit asked Zuri why her water was so cold. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Because even water likes to feel fresh, sir." The man laughed so hard, he bought 10. When the sun got too hot, they would sit together in the shade of a kiosk, sharing a sachet of water between them and talking about the future. They began to dream again. "If we keep selling every day," Ada would say, counting coins in her lap, "in 2 months, we can pay for one small room. No more sleeping under the bridge. And then I can go back to school," Zuri would add, her eyes shining. Ada would smile, rubbing her belly. "You will be a nurse, or a lawyer, or maybe even a doctor." Zuri laughed. "Or an astronaut." "Astronaut, Kay?" Ada chuckled. "Do you see Space Shuttle in Lagos?" "No," Zuri grinned, "but I see stars every night when I look up. So maybe one day." These conversations were their private treasure, a little island of hope in the middle of the hard, restless city. The baby kicked more these days. Zuri would press her small hand to her mother's belly and talk to her unborn sibling as if he could hear her. "Hi, it's me, your big sister," she would say softly. "Don't worry. When you come, we'll take care of you. Mummy and I are making plans." Ada would watch her and think how much Chuka would have loved this moment, his two children together, even before they had met. By the end of each day, their feet ached, their voices were hoarse, and the heat clung to their skin like a second layer. But they went to sleep with the comfort of having earned something, no matter how small, and for the first time in a long while, Ada began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were on their way out of the darkness. They didn't know that fate was already waiting with another blow. It was a Saturday morning that began with promise. The sky was washed in gold, the air buzzing with the sound of early traders setting up stalls. Ada tied her wrapper tightly, balancing her tray of peppers, while Zuri adjusted the blue bowl of chilled pure water on her head. The plan was to sell everything before noon so they could use the extra hours to rest under the shade of Mama Piece's stand and count their earnings. They were almost cheerful that morning. Ada had been humming one of her old church songs, and Zuri skipped a little as she walked. She had learned the rhythm of calling out without straining her voice, and she had memorized which bus stops were busiest. By mid-morning, they had each sold half their goods. Ada suggested they cross over to the market on the other side of the road, where customers usually crowded near the fruit sellers. The traffic light at the junction was red, and cars were lined up in patient rows. They began to cross. The scream came before the impact. A driver, impatient with the morning jam, swerved recklessly around the other cars. His sedan was a blur of dark metal, the sound of its horn cutting through the air too late. Zuri turned just in time to see it. "Mummy!" she cried, but the warning was swallowed by the roar of the engine. The car clipped Ada's side. Her tray of peppers exploded into the air, a red shower that scattered across the asphalt. The force threw her off her feet. She hit the ground hard, her wrapper twisting around her legs. The car didn't stop. It sped off, weaving back into traffic like a predator, slipping into the shadows. For a second, the world froze. Then it erupted. Zuri dropped her water bowl and ran, her bare feet slapping the hot road. She knelt beside her mother, her small hands trembling as they tried to lift her. "Mummy, Mummy, please, wake up!" Ada's eyes fluttered open for a second, pain clouding them. Blood trickled from her forehead, and her breathing was shallow, broken. "Zuri, the baby," she whispered weakly. "You'll both be fine," Zuri choked out, though she could feel the fear squeezing her chest. Crowds began to gather. Voices rose, some in sympathy, some in annoyance at the obstruction. "Who get accident? Na hit and run, oh!" "See as the pepper scatter everywhere." Two men with kind eyes stepped forward. "Then we need to take her to a hospital," one said urgently. "Help me lift her." They carried Ada into a waiting Keki Napep parked nearby. Zuri climbed in beside her mother, clutching her limp hand, whispering her name over and over. "Hold her head up," one man instructed. "We'll get to Beardsley Hospital fast." The ride was a blur of bumps and turns. Zuri's heart pounded with every jolt, afraid each shake might take her mother further away. When they reached the hospital, Zuri jumped out first, running to the reception desk. "My mummy! She's hurt! A car hit her! She's pregnant! Please help us!" The nurse behind the desk barely looked up from her computer. "Accident case? You must pay emergency deposit first. $200. Zuri stared, her mouth open. 200? I don't have that. I have 1,000 naira. She pulled the crumpled notes from her pocket and placed them on the counter. Please, just start first. I will find the rest. The nurse's face stayed cold. No deposit, no treatment, hospital policy. But she's dying, Zuri's voice cracked. This is not a charity, the nurse said, already turning to the next patient. Zuri ran to the waiting area, begging anyone she saw. Please help me. My mother is pregnant. She needs treatment. A man in a suit frowned. Sorry, I don't give strangers money. A woman holding a Bible shook her head. I will pray for you, my dear, she said, walking away. By the time Zuri returned to the desk, the nurse was standing with a security guard. Madam, take your mother somewhere else. We can't block the corridor, the nurse said flatly. Zuri's voice rose into a scream. I won't let her die. You can't tell me to go. The guard stepped forward to grab her shoulder, and that was when he appeared. A tall man in a white coat, walking with the calm authority of someone who owned the air around him. His face was familiar. Zuri had seen it on billboards for Best Medical Hospital. Dr. Joseph Ifeanyi, the billionaire doctor. He stopped at the commotion, his sharp eyes taking in the stretcher, the frightened girl, the indifferent nurse. What's happening here, we asked. The nurse began, Sir, this girl. But Zuri did not wait. She ran to him and clutched his coat. Please, sir, help my mother. She was hit by a car. They say I have to pay before they help her, but I don't have. Her voice broke. Please, she's pregnant. The security guard moved to pull her away. Leave her, Dr. Joe said firmly. He crouched down to meet Zuri's teary eyes. Where is your mother? Here, Zuri sobbed, pointing to the stretcher. He turned to the nurse. Take her to the emergency room, now. But sir, a pregnant woman's life is at stake, and all you care about is a deposit? His voice cut through the air like a scalpel. Move her, call your best surgeon. Prep the theater. This woman will not die because of paperwork. The nurse shrank under his glare and nodded. Yes, sir. Zuri felt her knees weaken with relief as the stretcher began to roll toward the swinging doors. She looked up at Dr. Joe, tears still streaming down her face. Thank you, sir. Thank you. He gave her a small nod, but his gaze lingered on Ada's hand as it hung limply off the side of the stretcher. A tiny crescent-shaped birthmark rested just above her thumb. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition sparking in his mind. But that thought would have to wait. For now, there was a life to save. The emergency room doors banged open as the stretcher, carrying Ada, rolled inside, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. Nurses swarmed around her, some moving briskly, others glancing nervously at Dr. Joe, who walked alongside them like a silent shadow of authority. Zuri tried to follow, but a nurse blocked her path. Stay outside, little girl. No, I need to be with my mother, Dr. Joe turned. Let her wait just outside the theater doors, he instructed. Then he crouched to Zuri's level. They will do everything they can for her. I promise. Her eyes searched his face for any sign that he might be lying, but there was none. Still, her small hands were trembling as she let the nurse guide her to a bench near the swinging doors. Inside the theater, the sound of clipped commands mixed with the metallic clatter of surgical tools. Outside, the waiting room was a different kind of battlefield, the battlefield of time. Zuri sat hunched over, elbows on her knees, her hands pressed together as if squeezing them tightly enough could hold her mother's life in place. Her pure water bowl lay forgotten on the floor, ice melting into small puddles. A television on the wall played an old Nollywood movie no one was watching. A man nearby scrolled through his phone. A woman paced back and forth, muttering prayers. But for Zuri, the room was filled with only two sounds, the pounding of her own heart and the faint, muffled activity from beyond the theater doors. Every so often, she looked up to see Dr. Joe passing by, once giving orders to a junior doctor, another time on his phone speaking in low, urgent tones. But each time, his eyes would flicker toward her, just briefly, as if checking that she was still there. For Dr. Joe, the sight of Ada lying on that stretcher would not leave his mind. He had seen countless accident victims in his career, broken bodies, fading pulses, the fragile line between life and death. But something about her face and that mark on her hand lodged itself in a place he thought long closed. That crescent-shaped birthmark, it was identical to the one on his own hand. The moment he saw it, a memory from his boyhood uncoiled itself. Him at 12, sitting at his mother's side as she sewed clothes in their small shop. She had paused, looked at him with watery eyes, and told him the story of the sister he never knew. You had a twin, she had whispered. Two babies born the same day, but one was stolen, taken from me in the market when you were only 2 years old. I turned my head for a moment to measure cloth for the customer, and when I looked back, she was gone. We searched. We searched until our bones gave way, but she was never found. He had lived with that story his whole life, a shadow that followed him through medical school, through building the hospital empire, through every award and headline. He had long accepted that if she was alive, she was probably somewhere far away, living a life he would never touch. But now, could this injured, penniless woman be her? He returned to the bench where Zuri sat, her head bowed. What is your mother's name? He asked softly. Ada Chuka, Zuri replied without hesitation. Do you have any family nearby? An aunt? Grandparent? Zuri's eyes darkened. No, my father's people say my mother is a witch. My mother's people said she isn't their child, that they bought her when she was small. Please, sir, we have no one. Dr. Joe studied her face. She was young, but there was something in her eyes. A quiet resilience, as if she had already seen too much of life's cruelty. You will not have to pay anything for her treatment, he said firmly. Do you understand? Her lips trembled. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Back in his office, the questions would not leave him. Could Ada be the missing sister? Could fate be this strange? He called his personal driver and had a message sent to his lab at Best Medical Hospital. Prepare a rapid DNA test for familial relation. Rush priority, then he walked back into the ER after the surgery began to stabilize. Ada was under anesthesia, her breathing assisted by a machine, her face pale but still holding the faint structure that matched his own. He stepped closer to the bed, careful not to disturb the doctor's working. From his pocket, he took a sterile swab. Doctor, one of the nurses asked. He gave a short nod. Just collecting a sample for genetic purposes. Continue your work. With a gentle hand, he swabbed the inside of Ada's cheek, sealed the sample in a vial, and slipped it into the breast pocket of his coat. Later, he would take his own sample for comparison. The sound of the monitor in Ada's hospital room was steady now, a soft, rhythmic beep that reassured Zuri each time it filled the silence. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed, and the room smelled faintly of antiseptic and the lilies a kind nurse had placed on the windowsill. Zuri sat by her mother's bedside, her small hand wrapped protectively around Ada's fingers. Every so often she would whisper, I'm here, Mummy. It's okay, as if the words could anchor her mother to life. The door opened quietly and Dr. Joe stepped in. His white coat was gone now, replaced by a dark blue shirt, the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but his eyes were focused, the way a man's eyes look when he's about to do something that might change his life forever. How is she? He asked softly. Zuri straightened. She hasn't woken up much, but the nurse said she's stable. He nodded. Good, that's good. His gaze lingered on Ada for a long moment before he pulled a chair close to the bed. The DNA results still echoed in his mind. Full siblings, monozygotic, twins. For hours he had been rehearsing the words in his head, how to tell her, when to tell her, whether she'd even believe him. Now, sitting here, those rehearsed sentences dissolved into nothing. He reached out and gently touched Ada's right hand, turning it slightly so the small, crescent-shaped birthmark caught the light. Ada's eyelids fluttered open. Her voice was faint, hoarse from surgery and exhaustion. Doctor? Yes, Ada, it's me. How are you feeling? Her brows knit in confusion. Weak, but grateful. I know I have no money to pay for all this. Please, sir, I promise I'll work. I'll pay little by little. He shook his head. You owe me nothing. Not for this. She frowned, uncertain. Then, why? Why help us? He hesitated, his thumb brushing the edge of her birthmark. Because, Ada, you are more than just a patient to me. Her eyes searched his face. I don't understand. I know this will sound impossible, he said slowly, but I think you are my sister, my twin sister. The words seemed to freeze in the air between them. Ada blinked. You're what? He took a deep breath. When I was 2 years old, my mother took my twin sister and me to the market. She turned her head for just a moment to attend to a customer, and when she looked back, I was still there. But my sister, you were gone. Someone had taken you. My parents searched everywhere. The police stations, markets, villages, nothing. You vanished. Ada's lips parted, but no sound came. I grew up knowing I had a missing half of myself somewhere in the world, he continued, his voice softening, and I thought I'd never find her. Then today I saw you. I saw this. He turned her hand gently, showing the small crescent birthmark. I have the same mark, Ada, exactly the same. She swallowed hard. That doesn't mean... I ran a DNA test, he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers. The results came in an hour ago. You are my twin, my blood, my family. For a moment, Ada's mind spun in disbelief. She had lived 40 years not knowing who she truly was. She had been rejected by the people she called her parents, told she was bought like a forgotten item in a market. And now this man, this billionaire doctor, was saying she was his sister. Tears filled her eyes. All my life, I thought I was unwanted, that I didn't belong anywhere, that maybe there was something wrong with me from birth. Her voice broke. And you're telling me I had a family all along? Yes, he said firmly, his own eyes wet now. You were stolen from us, Ada. We never stopped being family. We were just torn apart. She turned her face away, biting her lip to stop it from trembling. But the tears escaped anyway, rolling down her cheeks and soaking into the pillow. Zuri, who had been listening silently, looked from one to the other, her young mind struggling to process. So, Uncle, you're my mummy's brother? Dr. Joe smiled through his tears and reached for her hand. Yes, Zuri, that makes me your uncle. Ada let out a soft, choked laugh, the kind that comes from deep pain. Look at me, under a bridge 1 week, lying in a hospital bed the next, and now you're telling me I'm related to one of the most powerful men in Lagos. This isn't about power, Ada, Joe said gently. It's about blood finding its way home. And now that I've found you, I won't let you go again. She studied his face for a long moment. Do you remember our parents? He nodded. Mama is still alive. She's older now, but strong. I haven't told her yet. I wanted to be sure before I gave her hope. When she hears, she will cry tears you have never seen before. Ada's eyes softened. She will want to meet me? She never stopped praying for it. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that holds space for two lives to realign, for grief and joy to exist together. Finally, Ada whispered, I thought God had forgotten me, Joe. But maybe he was just waiting for the right time. He smiled faintly. Maybe he was waiting for a little girl named Zuri to grab my coat and not let go. Ada turned to her daughter, brushing her fingers over Zuri's cheek. Do you hear that, my child? We are not alone anymore. Zuri nodded, a smile breaking through the tears on her face. Does that mean we'll have a house to live in and I can go back to school? Joe reached across the bed and squeezed her small hand. Not just a house, Zuri, a home. And yes, you'll go to the best school in the city. You'll have everything you need to dream big. Ada shook her head slowly, still in disbelief. I came here thinking I had nothing left to live for. And now I have a brother, a future for my children, and a reason to smile again. Joe's voice was thick with emotion. You have more than that. You have family who will never let you fall again. She reached for his hand, their fingers interlocking in a way that felt natural, like they had done it 1,000 times before, even if they couldn't remember. Then promise me, Joe, promise me we won't lose each other again. I promise, he said without hesitation. And in that hospital room, under the steady hum of machines and the faint scent of lilies, a family that had been fractured for 4 decades began to heal. The day Ada went into labor came sooner than expected. It was early morning and the hospital was quiet except for the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on the polished floor. Zuri had been sleeping in the chair beside her mother when she felt a sudden squeeze on her hand. She opened her eyes to see Ada's face tightening with pain. Mummy? Zuri's voice trembled. Ada took a deep breath. It's time. Within minutes, the room filled with movement. Nurses rushed in, checking her vitals, preparing the delivery room. Zuri was ushered outside, her small hands twisting together as she tried to listen for any sound from within. Dr. Joe arrived just in time, still in a shirt and trousers from an overnight meeting, his tie hanging loose around his neck. When he saw Zuri's worried face, he knelt. "She's in good hands," he reassured her. "I'll be here the whole time." For 2 hours, Zuri sat between sips of juice she didn't taste, her ears straining for news. Then finally a nurse appeared smiling. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "Your mother has delivered a healthy baby boy." Zuri's heart soared. She rushed to the door and moments later, she was allowed into the room. Ada lay on the bed, exhausted but glowing. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft white cloth. She tilted the bundle so Zuri could see. "Meet your brother," Ada whispered. Zuri leaned in, her eyes wide. The baby's fingers curled around hers instantly, holding on with surprising strength. "He's so small," she said in awe. "And so perfect," Dr. Joe added from the corner, his smile gentle. "Both of them are strong and healthy." For a while, the room was filled with nothing but the soft coos of the baby and the quiet laughter of the two women, one who had carried him and the other who had only just found them. 2 days later, Ada was discharged. But instead of being taken under a bridge or to another temporary shelter, this time a sleek black SUV waited outside. Zuri looked up at Dr. Joe, unsure. "Where are we going?" "To your new home," he said simply. The drive to Ikoyi felt like stepping into another world. The streets grew wider, the air calmer, the houses larger. When the SUV pulled up to a cream-colored mansion with tall palm trees swaying at the gate, Zuri gasped. "Is this yours?" she whispered. "Ours," Joe corrected. The gate opened, and they drove into a compound large enough for Zuri to imagine running laps in. House staff waited in the driveway, their faces curious but kind. Joe addressed them firmly. "This is my sister, Ada. Her children are my family. From today, treat them like air and water. Essential." Inside, the house smelled faintly of fresh flowers and polished wood. The living room stretched wide with soft cream sofas, glass tables, and a chandelier that glittered like a cluster of stars. Zuri's feet sank into the thick carpet as she followed her mother up the stairs. 2 bedrooms had been prepared, one for Ada and the baby, and another for Zuri. When she opened her door, Zuri froze. The walls were painted a soft pastel blue. There was a bed with a duvet as fluffy as clouds, a desk stocked with brand new notebooks and pens, and a wardrobe already filled with clothes in her size. On the bed sat a backpack with tiny gold stars embroidered on it. She turned to Joe, her eyes filling with tears. "This is all for me?" He smiled. "For the young lady who grabbed my coat and refused to let go." The next morning, Zuri woke to the smell of pancakes, fluffy and warm, served with a drizzle of honey and slices of fruit. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, glancing every now and then at her uncle, as if to confirm he was still there, still real. After breakfast, Joe made an announcement. "Today we go to visit some schools. Zuri, you'll get to choose which one you like best." Her jaw dropped. I can go back to school?" "Not just back to school," he said, "but to a place where you'll have everything you need to dream as big as you want." They visited 3 schools that day. The last one, with tall iron gates and sprawling green fields, stole Zuri's heart instantly. She watched children in crisp uniforms laughing together, teachers speaking gently, and a library bigger than the market where she used to hawk water. The principal welcomed them warmly, shaking Joe's hand. "We'll make the arrangements immediately," she said. "She can start next week." That night, Zuri lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the bridge, about the cold nights and the rain dripping through the cracks. She thought about Mama Peace and the Akara she used to slip into her hands. And she thought about how, in a single week, her life had turned completely around. Ada, meanwhile, was adjusting to a life she had never imagined. The baby had a crib in her room, stocked with soft blankets and tiny clothes. There was always food in the kitchen, always someone to help if she needed it. But more than the material comfort, there was peace. The kind of peace she hadn't felt since Chuka died. Some nights, she and Joe would sit in the veranda, the baby asleep beside them, and talk. "I keep thinking of our mother," Ada admitted one evening. "How she must have felt all those years, not knowing where I was." Joe's eyes softened. "When she hears the truth, Ada, it will be the happiest day of her life." Ada looked down at her sleeping son and then at her daughter's laughter echoing from upstairs. Maybe God really didn't forget me after all. A week later, Zuri's first day of school arrived. She stood in her new uniform, a crisp white shirt, neatly pressed skirt, polished shoes, and stared at herself in the mirror. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize the girl staring back. At the school gate, Joe crouched to her level. "Remember, Zuri, you belong here. Walk in with your head high." She nodded, her small hand clutching the strap of her star-embroidered backpack. By the time she returned home that afternoon, she was buzzing with stories about the new friends she'd made, the teacher who gave her a book to take home, the math problem she had solved correctly. That night, as she curled into bed, she whispered to her baby brother, "We're going to be okay now. I promise." In the quiet that followed, Joe stood at the door of her room watching. He thought about the twist of fate that had brought them together, about how, if he had taken a different route that day, or if she had been too shy to grab his coat, they might have passed each other without knowing. But fate hadn't let that happen. And now, as the city outside carried on with its noise and chaos, inside this house there was the warmth of family restored, and the certainty that they would never again be alone. The long morning of hardship was finally over. For Ada, for Zuri, and for the tiny new life sleeping peacefully in the next room, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with safety, love, and the quiet, steady promise of better days ahead. The moral of this story is, compassion can change destinies, and family is not only defined by blood, but also by the love and care we show each other. Even in life's darkest moments, kindness, persistence, and the courage to ask for help can open doors we never imagined. Fate may delay, but when it arrives, it can restore what was lost and give back more than we dared to hope for. I hope you enjoyed this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts and what lessons you've learned. Please share them with us in the comments section. We truly enjoy reading your feedback. And here's something exciting. In just a few days, we'll be bringing you another powerful and